During Donald Trump's presidency, tensions often flared between the United States and Canada, two of the closest allies in the world. Canada's values on trade, climate change, immigration, and multilateralism frequently clashed with Trump's America First agenda. But Canada wasn't standing alone. Around the globe, several countries openly and diplomatically sided with Canada, providing support in various international forums. In this video, we will explore 10 countries that stood with Canada against Trump's policies. Let's jump into the countries. Number 10. New Zealand. New Zealand's progressive government under Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was a consistent ally to Canada during the Trump presidency. New Zealand stood with Canada in defending multilateral trade through the CPTPP and in opposing Trump's nationalist trade rhetoric. Both countries were outspoken in their commitment to climate change action, frequently criticizing Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris Accord. Additionally, New Zealand shared Canada's commitment to human rights, gender equality, and refugee protection, making them natural partners on the world stage. Ardern and Trudeau were often seen as part of a bloc of progressive leaders resisting Trump's isolationist policies. Number 9. Netherlands. The Netherlands frequently echoed Canada's concerns over Trump's disregard for multilateralism and global agreements. Dutch leaders supported Canada in pushing back against protectionist trade policies and were vocal advocates for free trade and cooperation within the EU-Canada Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA. The Netherlands also stood with Canada on environmental issues, particularly in defending the Paris Climate Accord. On human rights and refugee protection, both Ottawa and The Hague coordinated their efforts to promote international norms that Trump's administration often challenged. Dutch solidarity with Canada helped strengthen the broader European response to Trump-era policies. Number 8. Australia. Australia and Canada share a long history of cooperation, especially within the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. During the Trump years, Australia stood by Canada in defense of free trade and multilateralism. As co-signatories of the CPTPP, Australia and Canada worked closely to strengthen trade relations in the Asia-Pacific region, despite Trump's abandonment of the pact. Australian officials also condemned U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods and supported Canada's position at the WTO. Moreover, both nations aligned on key security issues within the Indo-Pacific strategy, countering Trump's sometimes erratic foreign policy approach in the region. Number 7. Sweden. Sweden, known for its progressive policies and strong commitment to multilateralism, sided with Canada on several international issues. Swedish leaders expressed concerns about Trump's trade policies, particularly the tariffs that impacted Canadian exports. Sweden and Canada shared common ground on human rights, climate action, and the defense of global governance institutions like the United Nations and the WTO. Both countries were outspoken critics of Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement and worked together to uphold international climate commitments. Sweden's public statements often reflected support for Canada's approach to diplomacy and trade. Number 6. Norway. Norway has long been a partner of Canada in defending multilateral institutions and addressing global challenges like climate change and Arctic policy. During Trump's administration, Norway and Canada frequently collaborated to counter the White House's retreat from international agreements. Both countries remained committed to the Paris Climate Accord, championing environmental protection and sustainable development. Norway also supported Canada's advocacy for human rights and refugee protection, areas where Trump's policies often diverged sharply. On Arctic affairs, Norway and Canada worked together to maintain cooperation in the Arctic Council, despite Trump's more nationalistic stance. Number 5. Mexico. Mexico and Canada found themselves as allies during the contentious renegotiation of NAFTA, which resulted in the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. Throughout the talks, Mexico and Canada coordinated closely to resist Trump's aggressive bargaining tactics, which included tariff threats and calls for unfavorable concessions. When Trump imposed steel and aluminum tariffs on both countries, Mexico stood firmly with Canada in opposing these measures. Mexican officials worked hand-in-hand with Canadian counterparts to ensure that the new trade deal would protect key industries and workers in both nations. Their united front played a significant role in shaping the final terms of the USMCA. Number 4. Japan. Japan, under Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, stood beside Canada in advocating for free trade and global economic cooperation. As key partners in the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, a trade deal that Trump withdrew the U.S. from, Canada and Japan were determined to move forward without American participation. Japan also voiced support for Canada's stance during trade disputes with the U.S., particularly on steel and aluminum tariffs. Both Ottawa and Tokyo emphasized the importance of keeping global markets open, a clear pushback against Trump's protectionist policies. Number 3. United Kingdom. Despite the UK's complex relationship with the US, London supported Canada on multiple occasions during Trump's presidency. The UK government expressed disapproval of Trump's unilateral tariffs on Canadian exports and publicly backed Canada in pushing for global free trade. British officials echoed Canadian concerns about the weakening of multilateral institutions like the WTO. In security matters, the UK and Canada also coordinated closely within NATO, especially when Trump questioned the alliance's relevance. The UK was often a diplomatic partner to Canada, backing Trudeau's calls for international cooperation over Trump's isolationist approach. Number 2. France. France, led by President Emmanuel Macron, became one of Canada's closest allies during this turbulent period. Macron and Trudeau were united on several key issues: climate change, free trade, and international cooperation. Both leaders condemned Trump's protectionist trade policies, especially when Trump imposed tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. France backed Canada in the World Trade Organization, WTO, disputes and advocated for a rules-based international trading system. Additionally, Macron stood with Canada on global environmental efforts, especially when Trump exited the Paris Agreement. France also expressed solidarity with Canada during the G7 disputes, signaling strong Franco-Canadian ties. Number 1. Germany. Germany, under Chancellor Angela Merkel, was a strong and vocal supporter of Canada during the Trump era. Merkel and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau often appeared aligned on major global issues, such as defending multilateral trade, climate action, and NATO cooperation. When Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement, Germany doubled down on its commitment and praised Canada for doing the same. Moreover, Germany backed Canada during the heated G7 summit in Quebec in 2018, where Trump clashed with allies over tariffs and trade. Merkel publicly defended Canada's position on free trade and multilateral diplomacy, reinforcing the strong bond between Berlin and Ottawa. Canada's opposition to many of Donald Trump's policies was never a solo effort. Across Europe, Asia, and Oceania, key allies stood by Canada's side to defend global cooperation, free trade, environmental action, and human rights. While Trump pushed an America First agenda, these countries championed a different vision, one rooted in collaboration and shared global responsibilities. And as Canada continues to navigate global politics, these alliances remain crucial for the country's role on the international stage.